Everybody, this is Jonathan Kersting with the Pittsburgh Technology Council and TechVibe Radio. And I really don't think I could be more excited for the interview you're about to listen to right now, because as everyone knows, on the One Mic Stand, we talk to everybody and anybody in Pittsburgh's technology sector, and we get the chance to talk to people outside the tech sector. We like doing that too. And today is one of these chances where it's like, I feel like I'm talking to one of the absolute founding fathers of technology as we know it today. And I am not over exaggerating when I'm saying I'm in the presence of one Marty Cooper, who happens to be the inventor of the cell phone. I mean, when I heard about the fact that I could actually talk to this guy, I was like, oh my God. And I was like, this has to happen. How often do you get to talk to somebody that is responsible for really, I look at like technology as we use it today. Without our cell phones, we're nowhere. And so, Marty, thank you so much for taking the time today. Truly an honor and a pleasure to be able to get your insights about technology today, what it took to develop the cell phone back in the 70s when you were at Motorola. I mean, it's just, there's so much there. I could probably talk to you for hours, but we'll keep this to like half an hour just to make sure that we don't waste too much time. So thanks for being here today. Truly appreciate it.
I have great pleasure, Jonathan. I have some very fond memories of Pittsburgh. I have a great deal of respect for the educational institutions of Pittsburgh, and I know what an industrial powerhouse Pittsburgh is. So it's my honor and pleasure to be here.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's really cool. Could I ask you real quick, like what your experience was with Pittsburgh? I think you said it was a while back, but I'm just curious, any connections that you might have had with Pittsburgh in our tech sector?
Well, you may not know what a long legacy you've got in the educational area. I know you know in the industrial, but the time that I spent in Pittsburgh was well before you were born.
I believe it.
maybe before your father was born.
So. Oh, no. I was born in 1972, so I'm not that young.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I was in Pittsburgh well before 1972. I was a teenager.
Excellent.
And I was a teenager a very long time ago.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Very cool. Very cool. So, like I said, welcome to the show today. So we got to just jump right into this. The big elephant in the room is I'm talking to the guy that invented the cell phone, for crying out loud. And I think that is just fantastic. Give us a little bit of the story that kind of leads up to this. I mean, obviously you're working at Motorola. I mean, you're this lifelong tech guy, entrepreneur guy. You're at Motorola. What kind of research were you doing that was leading up to the fact that like we can develop like a handheld cell phone?
Well, first of all, the business that Motorola was in, their most successful business, people know about Motorola TV and consumer products, but our most successful business was two-way radio.
Okay.
So there's the radios that police use and businesses.
Exactly, right.
They manage mobile resources. It's probably the most boring business in the world. The one thing that was the most difficult thing in my life was to explain to my mother what a two-way radio was. But much rather had me be a lawyer or a banker or a doctor. But the one thing we learned in the two-way radio business is that people are fundamentally mobile.
Right.
They like to move around.
Right. We're moving around.
And they're very naturally mobile. And anything that constrains that mobility is not good. And sure enough, our main business was for many years, it was two-way radios in cars. Every police car, of course, had a two-way radio, and most businesses discovered that if they had mobile resources moving around, they had to stay connected. They couldn't stay in business without it. And then along comes the bell system. Once again, I think, well, no, you're not too young to remember the bell system. You were a child, and the bell system had a monopoly on all telephones. You want to have a telephone, you had to rent it from the phone company.
Right. I remember those days as a kid. Absolutely.
You couldn't even own a phone. And somebody in the Bell system, in Bell Labs, which was an extraordinary research organization, wrote a memo in 1947, really a long time ago, and suggested that someday the way to have lots of people have car telephones was to use this new technology called cellular. They didn't think that their idea was a very important idea, but they wrote this memo and put it in the files. And then in 1969, the Bell system decided they were going to make cellular phones.
Interesting. Okay.
Their version of cellular phones, Jonathan,
Okay.
was car phones.
Okay.
For
heading in the right direction, at least, right?
for 100 years, we've been trapped in our homes. We've been wired to our desk by this telephone wire. And the Bell system was going to solve this problem by trapping us in our cars. It didn't make any sense to us at Motorola. So we took the Bell system on. They were the biggest company in the world.
Right. I was going to say, that's no small task right there. You must have quite the team of engineers.
And Motorola was not a tiny company, but compared to the Bell system, they were a flea on the elephant. So we did take them on. We ultimately persuaded the FCC. The FCC decides who is going to use our radio frequencies.
Exactly. Right.
Radio channels. And we testified before the FCC over a long period of time. And in 1972, it sounded like they were going to make a decision. And we were scared that they'd make the wrong decision.
No, I can imagine. Like, what are they going to do?
It was my idea that the way to really persuade people was to let them have the experience. Let them walk around with a telephone. Remember, this 1972 was before cordless phones, certainly before cell phones. There were a few car phones around, but they were terrible. They were so few frequencies and so many people that during the day, when you wanted to make a phone call, the chances of getting a radio channel and talking on your telephone was 1 in 20.
Oh my, can you imagine that? Yeah, maybe I'll make a call, maybe I won't. Let's see. It's like a little gambling game, right?
Exactly. So at the end of 1972, I assembled a group of really brilliant engineers and designers. And in the first 3 months of 73, they worked day and night. And by the end of March, we had a working cellular phone. The phone was huge. If your listeners were a video, I would show them one. But I think most people have already seen a picture of it. If they haven't, they ought to buy my book called Cutting the Cord, How the Cell Phone Transformed Humanity.
We got to definitely check that out for sure, because that's going to be an awesome read.
So we took that phone to New York and then to Washington, did demonstrations. But it's in New York where I made the very first public cellular call.
Well, who'd you call? That's good. Did you call your mom and tell her I'm not a lawyer?
It was just serendipity. As a matter of fact, since you mentioned it, I can't imagine why it wasn't my mother that I called. But at the last minute, I was on the streets of New York with a reporter describing this phone to him. And I just talk about serendipity, decided, I think I'm going to call my competitor at Bell Labs, the guy.
Oh, perfect. I love it.
The guy that was running the AT&T program for cellular, the car telephone guy. His name was Dr. Joel Engel. So I took out my address book, physical address book, just to let you know how long ago that was. I looked up Joel's number, called him, and amazingly, he answered, not his assistant, not his secretary, but he answered. And I told him, Joel, it's Marty Cooper. He said, well, hi, Marty. I'm calling you from a cell phone.
Oh my goodness.
A real cell phone, a personal, handheld, portable cell phone. You can tell that I'm not averse to rubbing it in.
Not at all. I love it. I'd rub it in too.
So Joel was very kind to me, and we had a brief conversation. And to this day, Joel doesn't remember that call. He doesn't dispute that we had it, but believe me, we did have it. And
I believe it. That is amazing. I'm amazed at how fast you're able to actually take the technology and make that work. I mean, in the span of like a year or so with your engineering team, I mean, that's quite the feat.
Well, these guys were really good because
Wow.
some of the things that we did there were first in technology. The idea of just, I know it's a very technical issue, but
Mhm.
the idea of in a tiny, well, this thing was 10 inches high, tiny compared to today's cell phone, but
Absolutely.
to have a battery powered device that you could hold in your hand that could talk and listen at the same time had never been done before.
Exactly.
The device that made that happen in a car telephone was as big as a modern cell phone. And yet we had to put that inside a cell phone.
Exactly.
And then we had to come up with a battery we used a frequency that had never been used before, 1,000 megahertz. Of course, today all of that stuff is child's play. But
Back then, I mean, this is the technological feat, and I just think about the implications of this, and really what that's done. I mean, the idea of cutting the cord, as you say, it's really like setting us free. And I just think about, I mean, fact that we can at that point on, people can be mobile and communicate. I mean, not only has it saved lives when you think about that, but just the idea that it's opened up business possibilities and just so many other things, like really created, as in my opinion, a whole new paradigm of how we can conduct business and live our lives.
I think you're exactly right. And that's the reason I wrote the book that most people, certainly the youngsters, think that the cell phone is social media and things of that nature. And of course, those things are important because they are leading to a new era of collaboration, people talking to each other. You know, just think about the fact that when Einstein came up with relativity, when he wanted to collaborate with his fellow scientists, he'd write a letter. And some weeks later, he'd get later,
Exactly, right, exactly.
then he'd answer it. So a conversation could take years.
Right.
And you could do the same thing now in a matter of minutes. And that's kind of indicative of the power that the cell phone has provided ordinary people. So, and the place that really manifested the big advantages are in Africa and India, where
Definitely.
people are moving out of poverty just because of the lubrication that the
Right.
cell phone provides to commerce. In Mexico, there are people getting medical service in villages that never have had a doctor, and they get medical service with very simple add-ons onto the phone that cost a few dollars. A doctor in Mexico City can do a diagnosis of an eye disease in somebody in a village. They had an experiment a short time ago that's going to become real, where doctors in the big city in Mexico were doing ultrasounds of pregnant women.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, like literally saving lives because of this technology and improving the quality of lives. And I love it when you say it's this lubrication that allows business to happen in ways that it couldn't, to raise people out of poverty and create new wealth, which I think is just absolutely amazing. That's why, I mean, my brain really can't comprehend all the implications because there's just so many of them. But I feel like those are some of the major ones where it's just like, man, this is incredible stuff. So what were your thoughts like as cell phones kind of started, turning into smartphones, and really like the whole concept of having the phone then accompanied with basically a personal computer, and how that's opened even more business opportunities and more communication. It must be, I'd have a pretty proud feeling if I were you, being like, wow, like I kind of got these seeds started to what's really just completely taken over the world.
Well, Jonathan, it would have been presumptuous for us to imagine a smartphone in 1972.
Of course, of course.
People don't realize how fast technology has advanced, but in
Mm-hmm.
1972, there was no internet. There were no personal computers. Can you imagine that?
I know.
No cordless phones. The integrated circuit hadn't been invented. The transistor had just been invented some 7 years earlier. So we didn't imagine the power of walking around with a supercomputer in your pocket. what we did know is that someday everybody would have a personal phone.
Right.
And the way we express that is someday when you were born, you would be assigned a phone number. If you didn't answer the phone, you had died. And we're pretty close to that now.
You are very, very close to that. The idea of being assigned a phone number, it's kind of like next to your social security number is basically going to be your cell phone number for the rest of your life.
There are more people, there are more cell phones in the world today than there are people.
I know. That's like really terrifying in some ways. Like, oh my God, that's a lot of devices that are hanging out there.
Yeah.
What I find amazing is that you've done so much around technology and engineering and science through your very lengthy career. I mean, you started companies. I just, your passion for this, does it go back to being a kid? Like, what got you interested in trying to do this type of work?
Well, I've always, from my earliest memory, and wanted to know how everything worked. I knew that I was going to be an engineer. I didn't know what an engineer was when I was 5 years old. But I did see my earliest remembrance is watching some kids on the street with a magnifying glass, magnifying the light of the sun and burning paper.
Right.
And I thought that was incredible, and I got a Coke bottle and broke the bottom off because it looked like a lens. Well, that didn't work. But I've always wanted to know how things work. So when I ended up going to high school, I went to a technical high school, which is one of the smartest things I ever did, because I got the regular education, I got the English and math, but I had a shop every term, and I got to learn what the real world was like.
Interesting. Right.
So I learned not only about how to be an engineer and what the practical aspects were, but I learned a lot about education. You learn a lot more doing things than you do having somebody in front of a class lecturing. And then I was fortunate enough to go to a very good university. I went to Illinois Institute of Technology.
Great place, absolutely.
I serve on their board of trustees now, and it is an incredible university, and I've been grateful for that opportunity ever since. And I went to the Navy, and I'm very grateful to the government for having putting me through school.
Fantastic.
And I'm not sure. Well, one way or another, my folks would have managed to get me through school, but the Navy not only put me through school, but I had to serve in the Navy, which I did for 3.5 years. And by the time I got out of the Navy, I was a man enough to appreciate education.
Most definitely.
That I went on to get my master's degree. I taught for a while, and then the next lucky thing happened to me is getting hooked up with Motorola, where I ended up staying for some 29 years, and that I have to tell you is also one of the luckiest things in my life.
Interesting.
The founder of Motorola was an entrepreneur, a guy named Paul Galvin. He had actually a number of failures before he came up with this thing called a car radio, which was how Motorola started. And his thesis was, do not fear failure, reach out.
Exactly.
And I took that seriously. I had a number of failures at Motorola, one or two of which I talk about in my book.
Okay.
But Motorola tolerated those failures. They understood that if you don't try something, then you may never have a failure, but you also won't do anything.
Exactly. That's a really interesting attitude especially for going back into the 60s and 70s, because I always feel like, many people, it feels like if you fail, then it's this terrible thing and it costs money or something to that effect. And I know like in Pittsburgh, and we're all trying to follow more of that mantra, like in Silicon Valley and other innovation centers, that you got to fail to learn, you got to build from those failures in order to get to that success. And we want to be able to embrace these failures and learn from them to build these new products, right?
You got it. You got it. I couldn't say it any better, Jonathan.
Wow, that's a compliment of the day for me. That's so cool. So what are your thoughts? How do we inspire more people to do what you've done, to learn engineering, to take risks, be an entrepreneur, set out for that first failure and push yourself back up and try again?
Well, first of all, everybody is different. And I think that the biggest challenge we have in the area you're talking about now is our educational system.
Yeah, definitely.
Really, we're starting to figure out how to do it right. But as I mentioned before, the wrong way to educate people is to sit them in a room and lecture them.
Yeah.
My colleagues, I'm lucky enough now to be in San Diego, near the University of California, San Diego State University.
Okay.
So I talked to a lot of professors, and they figured out about the longest time that a person can listen to somebody lecture is about 10 minutes.
Okay, and they start fading out, right?
A good lecturer figures that out. He makes these things collaborative. We haven't yet figured out how to integrate things like game playing into the educational process.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But think about what the attributes of a game are. The game gets you engaged, it gets you interested, it entertains you. It also adapts.
Right.
And if you figure out how to create an educational process that makes learning like a game, think of what it would do to our inspiring our students.
Definitely. I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because before we hit the record button, I was telling you a little bit about our unicorn here in Pittsburgh, Duolingo, and they do exactly that. They basically have gamified learning languages. So you can learn over 40 languages, and it's done in a gaming format where little short bursts and you get rewarded and it sees where you're having trouble and it adapts. I mean, everything you were just saying is what our Duolingo app does. So I'm feeling like they're following a smart guy's thoughts here right now, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, I really believe that we are at the beginning of several revolutions, and
Excellent.
the cell phone is going to be, it's not so much the cell phone, it's the connectivity.
Right.
Connecting people, because now you don't have to put people in a room to have them either conduct business or get educated or do research. They can do just what you and I are doing now.
Exactly.
We're just learning how to do that. Zoom is wonderful. Looking at your beautiful face and watching this magnificent smile that you have is just great. But we've got a long way to go before when I look at you, I really should see a three-dimensional object. In case we can forget about getting on airplanes, which really
well, I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up because we have Facebook Reality Labs here in Pittsburgh, and they're working on just that. And they're basically calling it a miracle if this can be done. And the idea of having that 3D avatar, so it's like we're hanging out together, Marty. Like it's no different than if I was in San Diego with you right now and we're drinking a beer together.
Yeah, I think that, as I say, we're just at the beginning. We're just learning how to do things like what you and I are doing now. People are learning how to listen to these things. I don't know how many people listen to your podcast, but the youngsters have figured that out. They figured out how to multitask.
Right.
And for guys like me, it's a whole new learning experience.
Me too. Absolutely, me too. Any other tech trends that you're paying attention to these days? Things like crypto or fintech type stuff? What else is out there that's got you thinking?
Well, we do have some problems in the future. It'd be really nice if you could have a device on you that measures all of your physical attributes. This is covered, by the way, in my book, Cutting the Cord.
Okay.
But think about the fact that all of this all this information is your own private information. And if you're going to have a computer somewhere analyzing this to report to you when you're about to have a disease so that you can zap it and prevent that disease, somehow all that information has got to be kept private. And we're just learning how to do that. And as you read the papers.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty scary, but
we're not
being able to solve that problem would be pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, we are not yet totally successful at managing either privacy or security, for that matter. Security meaning how do we maintain control of our money, banking and things of that nature.
Exactly.
So we've got a lot of work to be done. but to me, that all represents opportunity.
Exactly.
And so the question you asked before of how do you inspire the youngster today? There is so much to do that's exciting and interesting. This has got to be the best time in history to be born and to get out into the world. And the most important thing is to teach people how to learn, because that is going to be their challenge for the rest of their lives. You know, the reason that you express all this enthusiasm, Jonathan, is I suspect that you're learning all the time when you talk.
I'm trying, man. I want to be a lifelong learner, and I've been honored with my job. I get to learn about all types of things every day through all the companies that we cover here in Pittsburgh, and I have opportunities to meet with folks like you. It just opens my mind, and I'm just like, oh my God, there's so much left to do in this world.
Yeah, well, I remember running into another lucky guy. But, and the scary part about that, Jonathan, is that if you stop learning, you lose the ability to learn.
That's a good point.
So,
exactly.
so people think that going to school is education. It's not. You start your education when you get out of school. And if you keep practicing learning, you don't lose that ability. Even a guy like me, I'm 92 years old, and I learn every day.
That's awesome. How inspiring. I mean, honestly, Marty, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me. I really got to encourage everybody to check out your book, Cutting the Cord. I'm going to get a copy because it's got to be just a fascinating read just to learn a bit more about the life and times that you've had, literally transforming our society through inventing the cell phone. I never thought I'd ever get to talk to you, and I just did. And my mind is a little bit blown. That's all I'm saying right now. It's so cool.
Well, it took a lot of people to make that happen. It took, if you think about it, having Motorola invest $100 million, this is in 1972 dollars, you know, it would be like $1 billion today.
Yeah.
And they did that over a period of 11, 12 years without ever making a nickel. So the head of Motorola at that time was Paul Galvin's son, the founder's son, Bob Galvin. But he was betting the corporation.
He was, literally, he would be betting the corporation at that point. I'd say he made a pretty good investment.
Yeah, it was, but it took a lot of guts to do that.
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah, that's one of those, you're not sleeping at night sometimes thinking about that risk. That's for sure.
And all those engineers that worked day and night to make the cell phone, that was only part of the deal. We had to also make the stations that are the center of the cell sites. So a bunch of other engineers were working on that. So it really took a team to make all of that happen. And as I told you before, I was just very lucky to be in a company that would allow that to happen.
I can imagine so. You must have some awesome memories, and just being like to be part of that and have led the team on that. It's got to be just incredible. And I just can't thank you enough once again, Marty, for taking the time with us. This conversation has just been so fascinating, everybody. This has been Jonathan Kersting with the Pittsburgh Technology Council and TechVibe Radio. Feeling quite lucky today to just had this conversation with Marty Cooper, the inventor of the cell phone. And once again, check out his book, Cutting the Cord. I mean, it's kind of just a fascinating read. I'm going on Amazon right now to find it. That's for sure.
Great. Amazon and your neighborhood bookstore.